Before we begin this story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The Blue Note Jazz Club hummed with anticipation as Nora Hart's fingers crashed onto the piano keys. The first notes of her composition shattered the quiet, commanding attention from every corner of the smoke-filled room. Her dark skin glistened as she poured herself into each chord. The vintage blue dress, her mother's, clung to her slender frame. "Play that again, Hart, make it cry," someone called. A smile touched her lips as she transitioned into a blues progression. This was her sanctuary, the only place where reality temporarily lifted from her shoulders. Reality that waited just outside. Medical bills for her sister Lila's lupus treatments, the leaking ceiling in their Harlem apartment. The electricity notice marked final. And she said, when the applause erupted, Nora's eyes caught on a man at the back. Tall, impeccably dressed, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes that seemed to pierce through her. Julian Knight hadn't intended to visit Harlem tonight. His world existed 40 floors above Manhattan in steel and glass, yet his driver had taken a wrong turn, and the sound of piano had drawn him in like a siren's call. "Who is she?" he asked the bartender. "That's Nora Hart. Parents were jazz legends until their plane went down, left her raising her sister alone." After her set, Nora packed up as Julian approached. "Your Chopin interpretation was interesting," he said, almost defiant. "Chopin could use some defiance," she replied, straightening her spine. "Julian Knight," he extended his hand. "I know who you are." Everyone in New York knew the Knight name, the architectural empire, the philanthropy, the tragedy of his fiancée's death. "Nora Hart, I have a proposition for you." She raised an eyebrow. "I don't accept propositions from men I've just met, no matter how expensive their watches." His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. "A professional proposition. I need a pianist for a charity event. $10,000, 0 cents for one night." Nora's fingers froze on her case. $10, 0 cents would cover Lila's treatment for months. Her phone vibrated. "Fever's worse. Don't panic, but maybe come home soon." "I have to go," she said. "My sister." "I'll have my driver take you," Julian said, offering his card. "The event is Thursday at the Piermont." Their fingers brushed as she took it, something electric passing between them. "I hope to hear from you, Nora Hart." The way he said her name like he was tasting it sent a shiver down her spine. "Don't count on it," she replied, but both knew it was a lie. The Piermont Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with crystal and old money. Nora sat at the Bosendorfer piano in an emerald silk gown Julian had sent, the $10,000 0 cents check already in her account, Lila's treatment scheduled. From her position, she watched Julian work the room. Occasionally, his eyes found hers, sending heat through her veins. Then a striking blonde approached him, placing a possessive hand on his arm, Sophia Vale, the woman everyone expected him to marry eventually. Something twisted in Nora's stomach as she played Debussy with her own fierce improvisations. The event coordinator approached during her break. "There's been a change. Mrs. Goldstein has requested her niece perform instead. She's a Juilliard graduate, and as the Goldsteins are major donors..." Humiliation burned through Nora as she gathered her music. In the corridor, she heard Julian's voice, cold with fury. "This is unacceptable, Clara. Miss Hart was personally selected by me. She stays." "This isn't just about a pianist, is it?" Clara replied. "I've seen how you look at her. She's not from our world, Julian. After Emma..." "Don't use Emma to manipulate me. I'm protecting you. Getting involved with someone like her, someone with nothing, will only bring complications." "Someone like her?" Julian's voice dropped dangerously. "Someone with extraordinary talent, someone who works multiple jobs to care for her sister instead of living off a trust fund." Nora barely stepped back before Julian rounded the corner. "Eavesdropping, Miss Hart?" "Being disgusted," she corrected. "I was just leaving. Apparently I'm not Goldstein approved. You're not leaving unless you want to." The challenge in his voice awakened something in her. "I don't back down easily, Mr. Knight." His smile revealed dimples she hadn't noticed before. "Neither do I." "Want fight for me to stay?" she asked. Julian stepped closer, his cologne enveloping her. "Your audition tomorrow at Juilliard. Play your composition tonight. Not Chopin, not Debussy, Your music. That's not what your guests want to hear. I don't care what they want. His voice dropped. I want to hear you. The next morning, Nora sat outside the Juilliard audition room, hands trembling as she reviewed her music, her third attempt at admission. Inside, 3 judges waited. Behind them, in the shadows, sat Julian Knight. She played her original composition, autobiographical, moving from childhood joy through devastating loss to determined hope. Flawless until the final movement, when a wrong note broke her concentration. Her fingers stumbled over the complex passage. The center judge made a note. Nora's heart sank. Outside, she fought tears of frustration. That was extraordinary, Julian said, appearing beside her. I failed, she said flatly. Perfect is boring. Your composition was moving, authentic, and flawed. There won't be a 4th attempt. There won't need to be. The door opened, and the judge emerged, eyes widening at Julian. Mr. Knight! I didn't realize you were personally acquainted with Miss Hart. We have a mutual appreciation for authentic art, he replied. I trust the committee will make the right decision. The judge's smile tightened. Our admissions process is quite rigorous, as is my review of which institutions receive my family's endowments, he replied pleasantly. Nora stepped between them. I don't need or want special consideration. The fire in her eyes surprised him. After a long moment he nodded. Of course, my apologies. As the judge left, Julian faced Nora again. I have another proposition for you. No, she said immediately. You haven't heard it yet. I don't need your charity or your connections. He stepped closer, the heat of his body radiating toward her. What do you want, Nora Hart? The way he said her name made her pulse quicken. To succeed on my own terms, she answered truthfully. To not owe anyone anything. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Noble, impractical, but noble. Not all of us were born with silver spoons, Mr. Knight. Julian, he corrected softly. And for the record, it was platinum. Despite herself, Nora laughed. A genuine sound that transformed her face and revealed dimples in her cheeks. Julian stared, something vulnerable briefly crossing his expression. My proposition is simply dinner tomorrow night, just conversation between 2 musicians. You're not a musician, she challenged. I was, he said quietly, once. The sadness in his voice touched something in her, a recognition of loss she understood too well. On dinner, she conceded, but I pay for myself. His lips twitched. As you wish. As he walked away, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped onto a dangerous path, one that might lead to salvation or destruction. Either way, she knew her life had irrevocably changed the moment Julian Knight had walked into that jazz club. A graveyard of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs, nothing remotely suitable for dinner with a man worth billions. Not that she cared to impress Julian Knight. This was about setting boundaries, making clear she wasn't for sale. You could just call and cancel, Lila suggested from the doorway, her thin frame leaning against the jamb. At 16, illness had hollowed her cheeks, but couldn't dim the mischief in her eyes. Or you could admit you want to go. I'm going to make a point, Nora insisted, pulling out a simple black dress. The point being, you're into him? Lila grinned, dodging the pillow Nora threw. The point being, I don't need saving. Right. And the way your eyes lit up when his flowers arrived was totally about independence. Nora glanced at the extravagant arrangement of white orchids dominating their tiny kitchen table. The card had read simply, looking forward to tonight. He's not even my type, Nora muttered. Gorgeous, powerful, willing to face down the Goldsteins for you? He's everyone's type. The doorbell rang and both sisters froze. He's an hour early, Nora whispered, horrified. Lila peeked through the peephole, then turned with wide eyes. It's him, and he brought people. Before Nora could respond, Lila pulled open the door, revealing Julian in an impeccably tailored suit, flanked by a man and woman carrying garment bags. Mr. Knight, Lila said with exaggerated formality, what an unexpected pleasure. Julian took in the cramped apartment with a single sweep. The water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the textbooks spread across the coffee table, his expression revealing nothing. You must be Lila, he said warmly. Your sister speaks highly of you. Funny, she barely mentions you. Lila replied with a grin. Lila, Nora hissed, emerging from the bedroom in leggings and an oversized t-shirt. Mr. Knight, you're early. Julian, he corrected. And I apologize for the intrusion. I thought you might appreciate some options for tonight. He gestured to his companions. I have clothes, Nora said stiffly. Of course, but 11 Madison Park just called. They've given us the chef's table. It's quite an honor. Chef's table? Lila whistled. That's a 3-month wait list. Which is why I'm here early, Julian continued smoothly, to offer you the services of my stylist, if you'd like. No obligation. The woman stepped forward. We've brought several options, nothing ostentatious. Nora wanted to refuse, to prove she didn't need his world or its trappings, but the truth was, she had nothing appropriate for 11 Madison Park. Fine, she relented, but I'll repay you. Something flashed in Julian's eyes. Respect, perhaps? I'll wait downstairs. After he left, the stylist unveiled 3 dresses, each simple yet elegant. He was very specific, the woman said. No labels showing, nothing that screamed money. Nora chose a burgundy dress with a modest neckline and a hem that fell just below her knees. Simple gold earrings completed the look. When she descended to the street, Julian's expression shifted subtly, a quickening of breath, a darkening of his eyes. You look beautiful, he said quietly. It's just a dress, she replied, but couldn't help feeling pleased. His car waited, not the ostentatious limousine she'd expected, but a sleek black Aston Martin. He opened the passenger door himself rather than relying on his driver. I thought we might enjoy the privacy, he explained, sliding behind the wheel. The interior smelled of leather and his cologne, subtle yet masculine. As they pulled away, Nora noticed her neighbors watching, curiosity and judgment in equal measure. You're causing quite a stir in my building, she said. Good. I enjoy making an impression. Is that what I am? An impression you're making? His hands tightened on the wheel. You're many things, Nora Hart, but a statement isn't one of them. At the restaurant, they were ushered to a private table overlooking the kitchen. The chef himself greeted Julian warmly. Mr. Knight, always an honor. The usual champagne, Miss Hart's preference tonight, Julian replied, deferring to her with unexpected grace. Nora ordered still water, refusing to be intimidated by the menu without prices. You didn't get into Juilliard, Julian said after the chef departed. Her stomach dropped. You seem well informed. I am. Did you threaten them? No, but I did inquire. And they're fools. His voice was quiet but sharp. They admitted a trustee's niece with half your talent. Nora stared at her water. That's life. It doesn't have to be. What does that mean? Julian leaned forward, his eyes intent. I have a proposition. A real one this time. I'm not interested in becoming your charity case. How about my piano teacher? Nora blinked. What? I told you I was a musician once. I want to play again. He flexed his hands. Strong architect's hands that looked like they could crush stone. I haven't touched a piano since Emma died. Your fiancé? Nora said softly. Yes. His jaw tightened. 3 years is long enough to grieve. I want to reclaim that part of myself. There are dozens of instructors more qualified than me. None who play like you. His eyes held hers. None who make me want to feel music again. Heat crept up Nora's neck. And what would this arrangement entail? 1 year. You live in my guest house, teach me 3 times weekly, perform at select events. I'll pay you enough to cover your sister's treatments and your tuition at Manhattan School of Music. MSM rejected me too. They've reconsidered. At her look of outrage, he added, not through threats. I endowed a scholarship for underprivileged musicians with extraordinary talent. You're the first recipient. That's manipulation. That's strategy. Julian's expression softened. You're too talented to waste away in bars, Nora. And what do you really get from this arrangement? His eyes darkened. The chance to feel something again. The air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. Nora knew she should refuse. Maintaining her independence meant everything, but Lila's treatments, a real education, a chance to play a Steinway daily. I would need absolute autonomy, she said finally. My own space, my own schedule, no controlling behavior. Agreed. And if at any time I want to end the arrangement, you can leave with all earnings to date, no strings. Nora studied him, searching for deception. Why me, Julian, really? His gaze traveled over her face, lingering on her lips. Because when you play, the world falls away. Because in a room full of artifice, you're the only real thing. Her heart stuttered. No man had ever looked at her with such intensity, such hunger, that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with her soul. 1 year, she agreed, starting next week. What Nora didn't say was what terrified her most. Not the money, not the opportunity, but the way Julian Knight looked at her, like a man dying of thirst who'd found the first drop of water in a desert, like a man who could consume her entirely if she let him. And God help her, part of her wanted to be consumed. Chapter 3. Ivory and Ebony. The guest house on Julian Knight's estate made Nora's entire apartment building look like a storage shed. Set across manicured grounds from the main mansion, the two-story structure boasted floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting. Inside, minimalist furniture and warm woods and soft fabrics created an environment that was luxurious without being ostentatious. But what held Nora's attention was the baby grand piano, positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. Is this acceptable? Julian asked, watching her take it all in. It'll do, she said, feigning nonchalance, while her heart raced at the thought of playing such a beautiful instrument daily. A smile tugged at his lips. You're a terrible liar. And you're overcompensating. She ran her fingers over the piano. I'm your teacher, not a visiting dignitary. Perhaps I need to give beauty as much as receive it, he said, something vulnerable beneath the words. Before she could respond, he cleared his throat. First lesson tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. in the main house. After he left, Nora called Lila, who had moved in with their aunt temporarily. How's the palace? Her sister asked immediately. Ridiculous, Nora admitted. I feel like an imposter. Or Cinderella, Lila teased. Is the knight as handsome up close? This isn't a fairy tale, Nora said sharply. It's business. Keep telling yourself that, sis. After unpacking her meager belongings, Nora explored the grounds, discovering a small pond behind the guest house where koi fish swam in lazy circles. The entire estate was designed with the same attention to detail she'd noticed in Julian himself. Every view perfectly framed, every path purposeful, yet flowing naturally with the landscape. As dusk fell, she noticed lights flicking on in a separate wing of the main house. Through distant windows, she could see Julian bent over a drafting table, his profile concentrated and intense. A reminder that while she was adjusting to his world, he continued building it. Morning arrived with sunshine streaming through windows no one had bothered to cover with curtains. Nora dressed carefully in black jeans and a simple blouse, professional but not trying too hard. She'd spent half the night convincing herself this was strictly a job. The housekeeper, Esther, led her through the main house, which felt more like a museum than a home. All clean lines, modern art, and spaces too perfect to actually use. Then they reached a room unlike any other in the mansion. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, worn leather chairs huddled near a fireplace, and books filled built-in shelves from floor to ceiling. It felt lived in, almost cozy, compared to the sterile perfection of the rest of the house. And at the center, a magnificent Steinway grand piano gleamed black and perfect in the morning light. It was my mother's room, Julian said, entering silently. The only one I didn't remodel. Nora turned, her greeting dying on her lips. Julian wore not his usual tailored suit, but faded jeans and a simple white t-shirt that clung to his broad shoulders. With his feet bare and hair slightly mussed, he looked younger, almost approachable. I didn't expect casual Friday, she managed. I didn't think piano required a three-piece suit. His eyes swept over her, quick but thorough. Shall we begin? Nora had prepared a conventional first lesson. Scales, theory, foundations. But when Julian sat at the bench, his posture was already that of a trained musician. Play something for me, she requested, so I can assess where we're starting. His hands hovered over the keys, elegant fingers tensing. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then he began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major with a technical precision that surprised her. Each note was perfect, each dynamic shift executed flawlessly. And yet, "You're not breathing," she said. His hands faltered. "What?" "You're breathing, but it's shallow, controlled. Music needs breath to live." "I'm playing every note correctly," he said, an edge creeping into his voice. "Technically, yes. Emotionally, you might as well be reading a spreadsheet." She moved closer, not quite touching the bench. "When did you stop feeling the music?" His jaw tightened. "I hired you to teach technique, not psychoanalyze me." "You hired me because I make you feel something," she countered, throwing his own words back at him. Or was that just a line? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Without warning, he began to play again, this time with a ferocity that transformed the gentle nocturne into something wild and barely contained. His fingers almost punished the keys, drawing sounds from the Steinway that were both beautiful and slightly terrifying. When he finished, they were both breathing hard. "Better?" he asked, voice rough. "Different," she acknowledged, "but still hiding." "I don't hide," he said flatly. "I build, design, create. That's who I am, not who. What?" She sat beside him on the bench, careful to maintain a professional distance, despite the heat radiating from his body. "Tell me about the piano. When did you start playing?" The unexpected question seemed to catch him off guard. He stared at the keys for a moment before answering. "I was 5. My mother insisted the night air needed cultural refinement." "Did you enjoy it?" "At first." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was good. It came naturally. My teacher called me a prodigy." "What changed?" His fingers traced a silent melody on his thigh. "My father attended a recital when I was 13. Afterward, he said music was an acceptable hobby but a distraction from what mattered, the family business. He cut my lessons from 5 hours weekly to 1. Nora heard the echoes of a childhood wound in his controlled tone. "But you kept playing in college." "Yes." He hesitated. "I met Emma in a music theory class. She played violin." The name hung between them, his deceased fiancée. Nora waited, giving him space to continue or retreat. "After she died," he shook his head, "I couldn't. The piano became a monument rather than an instrument." Understanding bloomed within Nora. His technical perfection was a defense, a way to engage with music without feeling the emotions it evoked, without remembering. "Play this," she said, reaching past him to place new sheet music on the stand. Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, second movement. His eyebrows rose. "Rather on the nose, don't you think?" "Less talk, more playing, Mr. Knight." The slow, melancholy adagio cantabile filled the room as Julian played. This time, Nora noticed his breathing changing, deepening despite his apparent resistance. The music worked its way past his defenses. "Better," she said when he finished. "Now tell me what you're designing over there." She nodded toward a drafting table in the corner where architectural plans lay spread out. Surprise flickered across his face at the sudden change of subject. "A community arts center in Brooklyn. Why?" "Show me." After a moment's hesitation, he led her to the table. The designs were unlike anything she'd expected, a building that seemed to flow like music, with spaces that opened into each other organically. "These curved walls," she said, tracing the lines with her finger, "they're like a visual representation of sound waves." "Yes," he replied, animation entering his voice for the first time. "The acoustics in the main hall will create a natural amplification. And here," he pointed to a series of smaller rooms, "practice spaces, designed to be accessible to the community, not just established musicians." "You're building something that matters," she observed quietly. "I'm trying." He met her eyes. "My father built luxury towers for the wealthy. I want to create spaces that connect communities instead of dividing them." In that moment, Nora saw beyond the night air, beyond the privileged architect, to the man who used his talent to bridge worlds, not unlike what she tried to do with music. "Back to the piano," she said, returning to the bench. "Let's try something different. Play what you feel when you look at those designs." "That's not how classical training works," he protested. "I'm not interested in your classical training. I'm interested in your voice." She gestured to the keys. "Show me what those buildings sound like to you." After a long moment, Julian sat beside her. His hands hovered uncertainly before finding a melody, tentative at first, then growing more confident. What emerged wasn't Chopin or Beethoven, but something entirely new, contemporary, with jazz influences and unexpected harmonies. His body relaxed into the music, his breathing deepened, and for the first time, Nora saw him truly play. When the improvisation ended, he looked almost surprised, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "That," she said softly, "is what I want to teach you to find again." "I don't know if I can," he admitted, vulnerability stark in his eyes. "Not consistently." "You can." She placed her hands on the keys beside his. "Close, but not touching. Play with me. Follow where I lead, then take over when you're ready." They began a musical conversation, Nora offering phrases that Julian answered, their hands moving across the keyboard in a dance that required awareness of each other's space without physical contact. The intimacy of it created a tension that had nothing to do with their bodies and everything to do with their souls, recognizing something in each other. When they finally stopped, the silence felt charged with possibility. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, standing quickly to break the spell. Julian nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Nora. I'm just doing my job." "No," he said quietly. "You're seeing me. There's a difference." As she walked back to the guest house, Nora tried to convince herself that the fluttering in her chest was professional pride and a good lesson, not the dangerous beginnings of feelings for a man who lived in a different universe from hers. That night, she sat at her own piano, trying to recapture the melody Julian had improvised. The music had revealed something essential about him, the visionary beneath the businessman, the artist, constrained by expectation but still creating despite it all. It scared her how much she wanted to know more, not just about his music, but about the man himself. This was supposed to be a job, an opportunity, not the beginning of something that could shatter her hard-won independence. Yet as she played into the night, his melody kept returning to her fingers, asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. Chapter 4. Family Wounds. 2 weeks of lessons had established a dangerous rhythm. Each morning, Nora would enter the music room to find Julian waiting, his composure a thin veil over something darker, hungrier. For 90 minutes they would orbit each other like celestial bodies, drawing close, then pulling away, their only permissible contact occurring when she needed to correct his hand position or demonstrate a technique. Those brief touches sustained her through the careful distance she maintained the rest of the day. "Your Bach is improving," she remarked one morning as Julian completed a particularly challenging prelude. "But you're still thinking too much." "Some of us can't simply feel our way through complex compositions," he replied. A rare hint of frustration broke through his control. "You could if you'd let yourself." She reached for his hands without thinking, placing them back on the keys. "Close your eyes." He obeyed, his jaw tight. "Now, play the first movement from memory. Don't think about the notes. Think about what they mean." "They're notes, Nora, not poetry." "Everything is poetry to the right listener." She moved behind him, placing her hands lightly on his shoulders. She felt him tense beneath her touch. "Breathe with me, in, out." As his breathing aligned with hers, she felt the tightness in his muscles begin to ease. "Now play." His fingers moved across the keys, at first tentatively, then with growing confidence. The music that emerged was transformed, no longer technically perfect, but alive with subtle variations of tempo and dynamics that made the centuries-old composition sound newly written. "There," she whispered, still behind him. "That's what I've been trying to show you." When the piece ended, Julian didn't move, his head slightly bowed. Without turning, he reached up and covered one of her hands with his own, holding it against his shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply. The moment stretched between them, tender and dangerous. Then the music room door swung open without warning. "Julian, darling, Esther said you were—" The elegant older woman froze in the doorway, taking in the scene before her with widening eyes. "I didn't realize you had company." Julian stood abruptly, putting distance between himself and Nora. "Mother, this is unexpected." Eleanor Knight was a study in cold perfection. Silver blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon, tailored cream suit emphasizing her slender figure, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. Her assessing gaze swept over Nora with undisguised disdain. "Clearly," she replied. You might have mentioned you had a guest. Not a guest, my piano instructor, Nora Hart. Julian's voice had emptied of the warmth it had held moments before. Nora, my mother. Eleanor Knight. Ma'am, Nora nodded politely, acutely aware of her simple jeans and blouse compared to Eleanor's obvious wealth. Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. An instructor? I wasn't aware you'd taken up the piano again. There's much we don't discuss, Mother. Evidently. Eleanor's lips thinned. Well, don't let me interrupt your lesson. I merely stopped by to remind you about the Foundation Gala next weekend. The board expects you to attend. I haven't forgotten. Wonderful. Eleanor's gaze drifted back to Nora. How interesting that you found someone to inspire you musically again. Emma would be surprised. The casual cruelty of the remark made Nora wince, but Julian's expression didn't change. I'll see you at the gala, Mother. The dismissal was clear. With a final assessing look at Nora, Eleanor turned and left, the click of her heels echoing down the hallway. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken tension. I should go, Nora said quietly. No. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of disorder. I apologize for my mother. She specializes in emotional warfare. She's protective of you. She's protective of the Knight legacy. There's a difference. He paced to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds. My father built an empire from nothing. His greatest fear was that I would dismantle it through weakness or poor judgment. And your greatest fear is proving him right? Nora observed. Julian turned, surprise flashing across his face. You see too much. I listen. It's there in how you play, restraint, fighting against passion, always holding back. He stepped closer, something shifting in his eyes. And what would happen if I stopped holding back, Nora? Her mouth went dry. That would depend on what you're holding back. His gaze dropped to her lips. Things that would violate our arrangement. I see. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Do you? He moved closer still, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Do you see what happens to me every time you walk into a room? Every time you correct my posture or demonstrate a phrase? Every time you look at me like you're seeing past all my carefully constructed walls? Julie, I hired you because your music made me feel alive again. What I didn't anticipate was how dangerous that would be. Before she could respond, his phone rang, shattering the moment. He answered with barely controlled frustration, his expression darkening as he listened. I'll be right there, he said tersely before hanging up. I have to go. Family emergency. Is everything okay? My sister's in the hospital. Alcohol poisoning, apparently. His face was grim. Our family tradition continues. I'm sorry, Nora said softly. Do you want me to— No, he cut her off. This isn't your concern. The sudden coldness stung more than it should have. Of course, I'm just the piano teacher. Regret flashed across his face. Nora, I didn't mean— It's fine, go take care of your sister. She gathered her music. We can reschedule. He caught her arm as she turned to leave. My family is complicated, toxic in many ways. I don't want you dragged into that darkness. I've handled darkness before, she replied, thinking of her parents' death, of Lila's illness, of years struggling to survive. His thumb traced a small circle on the inside of her wrist, sending shivers up her spine. Not like this. When he released her, the absence of his touch left her cold. That evening, Nora sat at her piano in the guest house, unable to focus. The encounter with Eleanor Knight had exposed the gulf between their worlds more starkly than ever. She didn't belong in Julian's life, not really. She was a temporary fascination, a novelty in his carefully ordered existence. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She's stable, thank you for asking. Ma'am? How had he known she'd been wondering? Before she could respond, another text arrived. I'm sorry about today. You deserve better. Nora hesitated, then typed, Is your sister really okay? The response came quickly. No, none of us are. That's the Knight family's secret. The raw honesty surprised her. What happened? Minutes passed before, too much for text. Dinner tomorrow, just talking. I promise to keep my complicated feelings in check. She smiled despite herself, typing, Dinner, 7:00 p.m. I'll cook at the guest house. You don't have to. I want to. Unless you're afraid of soul food made by someone who didn't train in Paris. His reply made her laugh out loud. I'll bring wine and my emotional baggage. Apparently. As she set her phone down, Nora wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. The lines between teacher and student, employer and employee, were already dangerously blurred. Adding friend, or something more, to that mix seemed reckless. But the memory of his hand on her wrist, of his eyes darkening when he looked at her, made recklessness suddenly appealing. Chapter 5. Midnight Sonata. Nora hadn't cooked for anyone but Lila in years. Now she moved through the guest house kitchen, larger than her entire Harlem apartment, preparing her grandmother's recipes with a nervous energy she refused to acknowledge. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Julian stood on the threshold, holding an expensive bottle of wine and something else, vulnerability in his eyes that made her heart stutter. You came, she said immediately, feeling foolish. Did you think I wouldn't? He stepped inside, his presence seeming to shrink the spacious living room. I thought you might reconsider blurring the lines. She took the wine, their fingers brushing. Too late for that. His gaze swept over her. Simple black dress, hair loose around her shoulders, bare feet. You look beautiful. It's just dinner, Julian. Is it? The question hung between them, charged with possibility. The scent of baking cornbread saved her from answering. Hope you're hungry, she said, retreating to the kitchen. My grandmother's shrimp and grits waits for no man, not even a knight. Dinner transformed them. Away from the formality of their lessons, seated across from each other at her small table, Julian relaxed in ways she hadn't witnessed before. He ate with genuine appreciation, asked about her family recipes, and for the first time really talked. My sister Ava, he said, refilling their wine glasses, has been in and out of rehab since she was 17. Yesterday was her 3rd hospitalization this year. I'm sorry, Nora said quietly. Is she older or younger? Younger, 25 going on 40. His smile held no humor. The Knight family curse. We age before our time. Because of the pressure? Because feeling things is considered a weakness? Julian leaned back, shadows playing across his face. My father believed emotion clouded judgment. Business required clarity, and clarity required distance from everything, everyone, especially everyone. He turned his wine glass slowly. My mother was chosen for her bloodline and social connections. Their marriage was a merger, not a love match. Nora tried to imagine growing up in such coldness. And they expected the same from you. Emma was approved, he said, his voice flat. Impeccable family, proper education, appropriate ambitions, the perfect corporate wife. Did you love her? The question slipped out before Nora could stop it. Julian met her eyes unflinching. I thought I did. Now, I wonder if I ever knew what love was supposed to feel like. What happened to her? Nora asked softly. Car accident, rain-slicked roads, a truck driver who'd fallen asleep at the wheel. His knuckles whitened around his glass. I was supposed to be with her. We'd argued that morning about the wedding plans. She wanted bigger, grander, more night-worthy. I canceled our dinner to work late. That's not your fault, isn't it? His voice held a razor's edge. I used work to avoid conflict. If I'd been there, you might have died too, Nora said firmly. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Julian set down his glass. You're the first person who hasn't offered platitudes. I've had enough everything happens for a reason to last a lifetime. She thought of her parents, of the plane crash reports she'd memorized. Sometimes terrible things just happen. He studied her face. How did you survive it? Losing your parents, raising your sister, keeping your music alive, all while the world tried to crush you. Who says I survived it? She gave a half smile. Maybe I'm just good at appearing whole. No. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. You are whole, beautifully, defiantly whole. That's what drew me to you that first night, your completeness in a world of fragments. His words warmed places in her heart long gone cold. Dangerous, she reminded herself. This attraction, this connection, it could destroy everything. Tell me about your sister, she said, changing the subject. Will she be okay? Understanding flickered in his eyes. He knew what she was doing, but allowed it. Physically, yes. Mentally, he shrugged. Ava rebels against our family the only way she knows how, self-destruction. And you? I became what was expected, the perfect knight heir. His smile turned bitter. Until you. I'm not responsible for your choices, Julian. No, but you make me question them. He stood abruptly, moving to the baby grand in the corner. May I? When she nodded, he sat at the piano, fingers hovering over the keys. What emerged wasn't Bach or Chopin, but something raw and improvised, minor chords flowing into a melody that spoke of longing and restraint. Nora watched his face transform as he played. This was the real Julian, not the controlled businessman or dutiful son, but the artist beneath the armor. When the final notes faded, she found herself beside him on the bench, drawn by forces she couldn't resist. That was beautiful, she whispered. It's how you make me feel, he replied, his voice rough. Unfinished, but possible. His face was inches from hers, his eyes asking a question. Nora knew she should move away, preserve the fragile boundaries between them. Instead, she closed the distance. Their lips met softly at first, tentative, questioning. Then Julian's hand came up to cradle her face, and restraint shattered. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and wanting pouring into this single point of connection. His mouth was insistent, demanding, while his hands remained achingly gentle on her skin. When they finally broke apart, breathing heavily, Nora saw her own hunger reflected in his eyes. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as her body leaned toward his. Tell me to stop and I will. His thumb traced her lower lip. But know that this isn't casual for me, Nora. Nothing about you has ever been casual. Her resistance crumbled beneath the weight of his honesty. When they kissed again, it was with abandon, a recognition of something inevitable. His hands tangled in her hair as she pressed closer, tasting wine and possibility on his lips. She barely registered moving from the piano bench to the couch, their bodies finding new ways to speak without words. Each touch, each kiss, was a confession of loneliness, of wanting, of finding something unexpected and precious. Stay with me tonight, she breathed against his neck. Julian pulled back slightly, searching her face. Are you sure? In answer, she took his hand and led him toward the bedroom, feeling both terrified and utterly certain. They undressed each other slowly, reverently, the moonlight spilling through uncurtained windows, turning their bodies to silver and shadow. You're breathtaking, he murmured, his hands trembling slightly as they traced the curves of her body. Nora had never felt beautiful before, not truly. But in Julian's gaze, she saw herself transformed, worthy of worship. She guided his hands where she wanted them, surprised by her own boldness. They moved together with the same synchronicity they'd found at the piano, anticipating, responding, creating something new between them. When pleasure finally overwhelmed them both, Nora felt tears on her cheeks, not of sadness, but of recognition, of finding home in the most unexpected place. Afterward, lying in his arms as rain began to patter against the windows, she wondered if she'd made an irreparable mistake. This wasn't in their arrangement. This wasn't protecting her independence. I can hear you thinking, Julian said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. This complicates everything. Yes. I'm still your employee. You're still my student. Yes. The world will see a rich man in his latest conquest. At this, he shifted to look into her eyes. Is that what you believe this is? No, she admitted. But it doesn't matter what I believe. Your world will never accept me as your equal. Then we change the world. He said it simply, as if rearranging reality was just another business deal. Nora laughed, despite herself. Just like that? No. His expression grew serious. Not easily. Not without cost. But nothing worthwhile comes without sacrifice. And what would the great Julian Knight sacrifice for me? She challenged, fear making her voice sharper than intended. His answer was immediate, unwavering. Anything. Everything. The certainty in his voice terrified her more than any passion could have. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this, not so quickly. She'd spent years building walls, protecting her heart, focusing solely on survival and Lila's well-being. Now this man threatened to collapse all her defenses with simple honesty. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough." He gathered her closer. "The rest we discover together." As they drifted toward sleep, tangled in each other's arms, while rain transformed to thunderstorm outside, Nora felt herself standing at a precipice. One step forward would change everything. One step back might save her heart but cost her soul. By morning, she would have to decide. But for now, she allowed herself this moment of perfect harmony found in the most unexpected key with the most unlikely partner. Chapter 6. The Gallery Opening. "Not that one," Lila said decisively, pushing aside the silver gown Nora had selected. "You're not a backup dancer for some pop star." Nora laughed, surveying the clothing racks that had mysteriously appeared in her guest house that morning. A note from Julian had explained, "Options for tonight. Choose whatever makes you feel powerful." "I've never seen so many dresses in my life," she admitted, running her fingers along fine fabrics that probably cost more than a year's rent at their old apartment. "That's the one." Lila pulled out a sapphire blue gown with clean lines and subtle architectural detailing around the neckline, reminiscent of sound waves. "Et you." Elegant without trying too hard. 2 months into their relationship, Nora still struggled with navigating Julian's world. Their private moments were perfect, whether playing piano together, discussing his architectural designs, or losing themselves in each other's arms. But public appearances brought complications neither could fully control. Tonight marked a significant step. Julian had invited her to perform at the gallery opening for Night Architectural Design's new sustainable community initiative. Not as entertainment, but as a featured artist whose composition would complement the exhibition. "You're overthinking again," Lila observed, arranging the gown on the bed. "I can see the gears turning. It's just—" Nora paused, searching for words. "This matters to him. These are his colleagues, his board members. What if I embarrass him?" "Impossible," Lila said firmly. "He's in love with you, Nora. The real you, not some polished society version." The word sent a thrill through her. They hadn't explicitly said love yet, though it hovered in the air between them, evident in every touch, every shared glance. "When did my little sister get so wise?" Nora asked, pulling Lila into a hug. "Around the time you started smiling again," Lila replied, her voice muffled against Nora's shoulder. The Night Architectural Design headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown. Unlike the minimalist sterility Nora had expected, the space felt almost organic. Curved walls, natural materials, and vast windows that blurred boundaries between inside and outside. "It's beautiful," she murmured, as Julian led her through the main gallery space, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I redesigned it last year," he explained. "The previous layout was my father's vision, all sharp angles and imposing spaces designed to intimidate clients into compliance." "And this is your vision?" she asked, noting how staff moved comfortably through areas that flowed into each other without rigid barriers. "Architecture should serve the people who use it, not the ego of the architect." His eyes held pride, not in himself, but in what his team had created. "Buildings are meant to be lived in, not just admired from a distance, like people," Nora thought, understanding another layer of the man beside her. The gallery space had been transformed for the evening, displaying models and renderings of the firm's sustainable housing initiative. Unlike typical luxury developments, these designs showcased affordable, community-centered living spaces with integrated green technology. "Each building includes community art spaces," Julian pointed out, guiding her toward a detailed model. "This one has a music room with recording facilities available to residents." Nora studied the miniature space, recognizing elements they discussed during their piano lessons: proper acoustics, storage for instruments, even a small performance area. "You incorporated my suggestions," she said, surprised. "Every one." He squeezed her hand. "Your perspective made the designs better." Before she could respond, a striking blonde approached, her smile sharp as a scalpel. "Julian, darling, you've outdone yourself," she said, air-kissing his cheek before turning calculating eyes to Nora. "And you must be the pianist everyone's—" "I'm talking about Sophia Vale, Nora Hart," she replied, noting how Julian's posture stiffened slightly. "How quaint. that you're performing tonight," Sophia continued. "Though I suppose we are all performing in our own ways, aren't we?" The barb was subtle but unmistakable. Nora felt Julian's hand tighten on hers. "Actually," he said smoothly, "Nora is both performing and exhibiting tonight. The composition you'll hear was specifically created for this project, an auditory representation of the community spaces." Sophia's smile never faltered. "How creative. I've always said you have a talent for discovering unusual talent." She turned to Nora. "Will you be joining the dinner afterward? The board can be quite intimidating for newcomers." "I look forward to meeting them," Nora replied evenly. "Julian speaks highly of their business acumen, if not their progressive vision." Julian coughed to hide a laugh while Sophia's eyes narrowed fractionally. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Eleanor Knight, elegant as always in cream and diamonds. "Mother," Julian greeted her with a dutiful kiss on the cheek. "You remember Nora?" "Of course." Eleanor's gaze swept over Nora with the same assessing coldness she'd displayed at their first meeting. "The piano teacher. Though I hear you've been promoted." Heat crept up Nora's neck, but she maintained her composure. "Mrs. Knight, the gallery is impressive." "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "Despite my son's insistence on focusing on low-income housing, the board prefers projects with higher profit margins." "The board will adapt," Julian replied coolly. "Sustainability and accessibility are the future of ethical development." "Your father built this company on luxury developments." "My father built this company," Julian cut in. "I'm evolving it." The tension between mother and son was palpable. Nora sensed a familiar argument, one that had played out many times before her arrival in Julian's life. "If you'll excuse us," Julian said, guiding Nora away. "Nora needs to prepare for her performance." Once they were alone in a quiet corner, he released a frustrated breath. "I apologize for both of them." "No need," she assured him. "I can handle a few barbed comments." "You shouldn't have to." His eyes held regret. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration." "And it will be," she said firmly. "Your work deserves recognition, Julian. These designs could transform communities like the one I grew up in." He studied her face, some of his tension easing. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Cut through the noise. Remind me what matters." The simple sincerity in his voice made her heart flip. "It's a gift," she teased, trying to lighten the moment. "Yes," he agreed. "Seriously, you are." He leaned down, kissing her softly despite the semi-public setting. When he pulled back, his expression had changed, more determined, more certain. "Stay here," he said. "I need to speak with the board before your performance." Nora watched him cross the room with purposeful strides, gathering a group of serious-looking men and women near one of the project displays. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, his body language spoke volumes. Confident, passionate, unwavering. Across the room, Eleanor and Sophia huddled together, occasionally glancing in her direction. Nora felt suddenly exposed, like an exhibit herself, the outsider who'd somehow captured the attention of Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. "Quite the lion's den, isn't it?" a deep voice said beside her. She turned to find an older man with kind eyes, studying her with interest. "Leonard Finch," he introduced himself, "New York Philharmonic." Nora's breath caught. Every musician in New York knew Leonard Finch, the renowned conductor whose opinion could make or break careers. "Nora Hart," she managed. "It's an honor to meet you, Maestro. Julian tells me you're composing original work for tonight's exhibition," he said, his gaze assessing but not unkind. "Bold choice for such a corporate event." "The designs themselves are bold," she replied. "The music should match their vision." He nodded thoughtfully. "And what vision do you bring to your composition, Miss Hart?" The question felt like a test, one that mattered more than any audition. Langdon adjusted his lantern match. Then he removed his glasses and polished off the test, one that mattered more than any audition. "Sapien doesn't belong exclusively to the privileged. That communities thrive when creativity has space to grow." A slight smile creased his face. "I look forward to hearing that translated into music." As the event coordinator signaled that it was time for her performance, Nora took a steadying breath. Julian caught her eye across the room, giving her an encouraging nod for taking his position at the podium for his presentation. His speech was brief but powerful, outlining the firm's commitment to sustainable development that served communities rather than exploiting them. When he introduced Nora, his voice carried an unmistakable note of pride. Our next presenter communicates through a different medium, one that transcends language and status, he said. Nora Hart's composition Foundations was created specifically for this project, translating architectural concepts into musical expression. I invite you to not just listen, but feel what these spaces might become. As Nora took her place at the grand piano, positioned among the architectural models, she felt a moment of doubt. These people weren't her usual audience. They were power brokers, influencers, critics, whose world remained largely foreign to her despite her growing place in Julian's life. Then she caught his eye. He wasn't watching her with concern or trepidation, but with absolute confidence, as if her success were a foregone conclusion. In that moment, something shifted inside her. This wasn't about proving her worth to his world. It was about bringing her world to them. Her fingers found the keys, and she began to play. Not the classical pieces expected at such events, but her original composition. It started simply, with a repeating motif that represented foundation, stability. Gradually, she built complexity, interweaving melodies that spoke of community, of lives intersecting, of spaces that fostered connection rather than isolation. The piece wasn't traditionally beautiful. It challenged the listener with occasional dissonance that resolved into unexpected harmony, just as the architectural designs challenged conventional notions of development. As she played the final movement, her gaze found Julian, and the music seemed to flow directly from her heart to his. When the final notes faded, the room remained silent for 3 heartbeats before erupting in applause that seemed genuinely appreciative rather than merely polite. Julian's face showed naked admiration as he approached the piano. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "You transformed the whole room." Before she could respond, they were surrounded by board members, critics, and potential investors, all eager to discuss both the architectural designs and the music that had interpreted them. To Nora's surprise, many engaged with her as a serious artist, rather than merely Julian's +1. Later, as they moved together through the crowd, his hand rarely leaving the small of her back, Nora noticed Eleanor speaking with Leonard Finch. The conductor gestured toward her, saying something that made Eleanor's perfectly composed expression falter momentarily. "What do you think they're discussing?" she asked Julian. "You, probably," he replied. "Finch is not easily impressed, but you managed it. My mother will be recalibrating her assessment." Sophia appeared at their side, her smile brittle. "Quaint little performance, though hardly appropriate for this venue." "Actually," said Finch, joining their circle, "it was extraordinary. Miss Hart has remarkable talent." "Remarkable indeed," Eleanor agreed, her voice careful. "Quite unexpected." "We're auditioning composers for our new American Voices initiative," Finch continued, addressing Nora directly. "Original works, highlighting diverse perspectives on the American experience. I believe you should submit a portfolio." The opportunity was so unexpected, so potentially career-defining, that Nora momentarily lost her words. Julian squeezed her hand gently. "She would be honored to submit her work," he answered for her, pride evident in his voice. "Excellent." Finch handed her his card. "My office will be in touch with details." As he moved away, Eleanor's calculating gaze shifted between Nora and her son. "Well," she said finally, "perhaps there's more to this relationship than I initially presumed." It wasn't acceptance, but it was acknowledgement, the beginning of a shift in perception that Nora hadn't expected so soon, if ever. As the evening progressed to dinner, Nora found herself seated beside Julian at the head table, surrounded by board members and key investors. The conversation flowed more naturally than she'd anticipated, particularly when discussion turned to the community impact of the proposed developments. "Miss Hart, you grew up in Harlem, correct?" asked one board member, an older woman with shrewd eyes. "What would you consider the most pressing needs for arts facilities in communities like yours?" Nora felt Julian tense slightly beside her, perhaps worried the question was a trap. But as she began to speak about the transformative power of accessible arts education, drawing from her own experiences teaching piano to neighborhood children, She sensed genuine interest rather than condescension. The mistake developers often make, she explained, is assuming communities need cultural salvation from outside. What they actually need is infrastructure to nurture the culture that already exists. Precisely the philosophy behind our community art spaces, Julian added, his hand finding hers beneath the table. By the time dessert was served, Nora had engaged in substantive conversations with half the board, found common ground with a prominent architecture critic, and even earned a grudging compliment from Eleanor on her unique perspective. As the evening wound down, Julian led her to a secluded balcony overlooking the city lights. The spring air carried a hint of warmth, promising summer just around the corner. "You were magnificent tonight," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "You won over even the most skeptical board members." "I didn't come to win them over," she replied honestly. "I came to support your vision." He turned her gently to face him, his expression more serious than she'd expected. "That's why I love you." The words, spoken so simply, so definitively, made her breath catch. They'd been building toward this moment for weeks, dancing around feelings that had grown too powerful to contain. "Because I like your architectural models?" she teased, heart-pounding. "Because you see me," he corrected, his hands cradling her face. "Not the knight, not the wealthy architect. Me. The man who wants to build something meaningful. The man who was incomplete until you walked into that jazz club." Emotion welled in her throat, making speech difficult. "I love you too." She managed the words, both terrifying and liberating, more than I ever thought possible. When he kissed her, it felt different from their previous embraces, deeper, more certain, sealed with words they couldn't take back. Behind them, the city sparkled like their own private constellation of stars, witnessing the moment everything changed. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in his bed, Nora traced the strong line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice husky in the darkness. "I'm afraid," she admitted, the safety of night making honesty easier. "Of what?" "Of believing this is real, that someone like you could love someone like me without eventually seeing all the differences." He propped himself up on one elbow, his expression visible in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "The differences are what I love," he said seriously. "Your perspective, your talent, your experiences, they make you who you are, who I love. But your world is just a place," he interrupted gently. "A setting, not the story. You and I are the story, Nora. Everything else is just decoration." She smiled at his architect's metaphor. Decoration can be quite intimidating when it comes with generations of wealth and privilege. "Then we'll build something new," he promised, pulling her closer. "Something that belongs to us alone, not to my family's past or society's expectations." As she drifted toward sleep in his arms, Nora allowed herself to believe for the first time that what they'd found might actually transcend the worlds that had shaped them. That love, like music, could create its own reality when played with enough conviction. Chapter 7. Rain's Symphony. 3 days of silence followed the gallery opening. 3 days of Julian attending meetings, reviewing contracts, and playing the role of the night air, while his mind remained fixed on Nora. She'd kept her promise not to walk away that night, staying by his side until the last guest departed, but had declined his invitation to return to the estate. "I need space," she'd whispered as his driver waited. "To think, to be sure." He'd respected her wishes, though each hour without her felt like slow torture. Their scheduled lessons remained cancelled, Lila's health the stated reason, though he suspected it was merely a convenient truth. By the 4th day, the silence between them had become its own entity, present, palpable, and growing more powerful with each passing hour. Julian tried to drown it in work, burying himself in the sustainable housing initiative that had once given him purpose. But the blueprints before him seemed hollow without Nora's perspective, her instinctive understanding of how spaces should feel, not just function. "Sir," Jensen stood in the doorway of his office as rain began to patter against the windows. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Cancel it," Julian said, rising abruptly. "Sir, the Sustainable Housing Initiative vote." "Can wait." He grabbed his coat. "I have somewhere more important to be." The drive to his estate took twice as long in the punishing rain, giving him too much time to question his impulse. What if she refused to see him? What if she'd already decided their worlds were too different to bridge? When he finally arrived, soaked despite the brief dash from car to door, the main house felt cavernous and empty. He headed toward the music room, drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. The sound reached him before he arrived. Piano music, wild and passionate, flowing from behind the closed doors. He recognized the piece, Chopin's fancy impromptu, but played with a ferocity the composer never intended, the notes almost violent in their intensity. He pushed open the door to find Nora at the piano, her body swaying with the music, hair falling around her face like a curtain. She wore simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, her feet bare against the pedals, completely lost in the storm she was creating with her hands. Julian stood transfixed, unwilling to interrupt the raw emotion pouring from her fingers. When the final chords crashed into silence, she remained motionless, head bowed over the keys. "That was," he began, his voice breaking the spell. Nora whirled around, eyes wide with surprise. "Julian, I didn't hear you come in." "Clearly." He moved closer, drawn to her like gravity. "The housekeeper let me in." "I didn't expect to find you here. I needed to play," she said simply. "My piano at the guest house couldn't contain what I was feeling." Thunder crashed outside, emphasizing her words. They stared at each other across the room, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space beside her on the bench. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, shifting slightly to make room. He sat down, careful not to touch her, though every cell in his body ached for contact. "I've missed you," he said. Finally, his fingers hovering over the keys without pressing down. "I've missed you too." The admission seemed wrenched from somewhere deep inside her. "More than I should." "Play with me," he suggested, finding middle C. "Like that first lesson." Nora didn't move at first, uncertainty evident in the tension of her shoulders. Then, slowly, she placed her hands on the higher octaves. They began with something simple, a Bach invention they'd practiced together, their bodies still separated by inches of charged space. The music provided a bridge between them when words couldn't, a shared language that bypassed their defenses. As the piece progressed, Julian felt the rigid line of Nora's posture gradually soften. His own breathing deepened, synchronized with hers, as it had during their earliest lessons. When the piece ended, the silence felt less suppressive somehow, more like a pause than an absence. "Why are you fighting this so hard, Nora?" he asked quietly. She stood, moving away from the piano toward the rain-lashed windows. "Because I'm terrified of what happens when the music stops, when reality returns. This is reality." He remained seated, giving her the distance she seemed to need. "You and me, here, now. Everything else is just circumstance." "Circumstance?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Your mother hates me. Your social circle sees me as a curiosity at best, an interloper at worst. Your business partners think I'm after your money. That's not circumstance, Julian. That's the world we live in." "A world that can change." "Can it?" Her eyes challenged him. "Your family has spent generations building walls around their privilege. Do you really think they'll accept someone like me crossing that moat?" "They don't have to accept you," he stood, crossing to the drafting table, where his latest designs lay spread out. "My new community center in Harlem, the one you helped me redesign last month. The board tried to kill it yesterday." She turned, surprise replacing anger. "What happened?" "I threatened to resign if they didn't approve it." A smile touched his lips. "Turns out the night name still carries some weight, even when attached to projects that don't cater exclusively to the 1%. You risked your position for a community center?" "I risked it for what matters." He met her gaze steadily. "Just like I'd risk everything for you." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, conflict, longing, and fear all battling for dominance. "That's what, Ter Proxy. I'm afraid that what I feel for you will consume everything I've built. Afraid that I'll disappoint you, that my world will taint what makes you so extraordinary, but most of all, I'm afraid of returning to the half-life I lived before I heard you play that first night." Tears gathered in her eyes, catching the light like diamonds. "I can't be your salvation." "I'm not asking you to save me," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I'm asking you to love me, with all my flaws, all my privilege, all my inadequacies. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face. Shock, longing, and something else, something that made his heart race. "I already do," she whispered. The confession hung between them for one breathless moment before Julian closed the final distance, gathering her in his arms with desperate need. Their lips met in a kiss unlike their previous ones. Not tentative exploration or passionate discovery, but homecoming, recognition. Her hands clutched at his shirt, pulling him closer as thunder shook the windows. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Julian pressed his forehead against hers. "Say it again," he demanded softly. "I love you." Her voice was stronger now, certainty replacing fear. "God help me, I shouldn't, but I do." He lifted her suddenly, spinning her in a circle that made her laugh, a sound of pure joy that filled the room more beautifully than any music. "I love you, Nora Hart," he said when he set her down, "with everything I am, everything I have been, and everything I hope to become." Her smile was radiant, transforming her face into something almost luminous. "Even if I keep playing Chopin like that?" "Especially then." He kissed her again, softly this time. Poor Chopin might be turning in his grave, but he never knew what it felt like to love someone who terrifies and completes you at the same time, she replied, her hands framing his face. If he had, he'd have written it exactly that way. The piano stood forgotten as they sank onto the leather couch. Hands exploring, lips seeking, bodies remembering the harmony they'd discovered before. Outside, the storm intensified, mirroring the passion building between them. Later, as they lay tangled together, the storm gradually receding outside, Julian traced patterns on Nora's bare shoulder. "I was thinking," he said hesitantly, "about the East Wing." She stiffened slightly in his arms. "What about it?" "It's sitting empty. It has its own entrance, complete privacy." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Would Lila consider moving in? It might be easier for her treatments, being closer to you." Nora lifted her head from his chest, studying his face. "You want my sister to move in?" "I want your family close to you," he corrected. "I know how much you worry about her." "And where would I be in this arrangement?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Wherever you want to be." His eyes held hers. "The guest house if you need your space, or—" He hesitated. "With me. In our bed. In our home." "You're asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking you to build a life with me." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No more arrangements, no more conditions, just us figuring it out together." Nora was quiet for so long he began to fear he'd pushed too far, too fast. Then she smiled, a slow, radiant expression that transformed her already beautiful face. "Lila would love the East Wing," she said finally. "All that space for her art supplies." "And you?" he prompted, heart hammering against his ribs. She pressed a kiss to his lips, slow and deliberate. "I think I belong wherever the music is strongest, right here with you." Relief and joy surged through him as he pulled her back into his arms. "I promise you won't regret it." "I don't need promises," she replied, settling against him. "Just honesty, and maybe a few closets for my things." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath her ear. "I think I can manage that." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed sky strewn with the first hints of a rainbow. It was, Julian thought, the perfect metaphor for what they'd found in each other. Beauty after chaos, hope after darkness, love after loneliness. 2 days later, Nora officially moved her belongings from the guest house into the master suite. Her clothes took up barely a quarter of one closet in the massive walk-in, a visual reminder of the differences between their worlds. But when Julian found her staring at the disparity, he simply wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "We can get rid of half of mine," he offered. "I never wear most of it anyway." She laughed, leaning back against him. "Keep your ridiculously expensive suits, Knight. I'll just have to shop more. Or we could convert one of the spare rooms into a music studio for you," he suggested. "Somewhere that's completely yours within our shared space." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, understanding her need for autonomy, even as they merged their lives, made her turn in his arms to kiss him. "How did you get so wise about relationships when you've spent your life avoiding them?" she asked. "I'm an architect," he replied simply. I know that the strongest structures have both shared and independent support systems. That night, as they lay in bed discussing plans for Lila's move, Nora traced the lines of Julian's face with gentle fingers. "Are you sure about all this?" she asked quietly. "Your family, your board? They're going to have opinions." "Let them," he said, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. "We're building something real, Nora. Something that matters. Fancy? Everything else is just noise." In the months that followed, there would be plenty of noise. Eleanor's icy disapproval, society whispers, board members questioning Julian's judgment. But within the walls they'd created together, they found a harmony that drowned out the dissonance, a love that transformed them both in ways neither had imagined possible. Chapter 8. Broken Chords. "I still can't believe this is our life now," Lila said, sprawling across the plush sofa in the East Wing living room. At 18, with her health improving steadily under better care, she'd blossomed, her artwork covering the walls of her spacious rooms, her smile coming more easily. "Sometimes I wake up expecting to be back in that apartment with the leaking ceiling," Nora admitted, curled in an armchair by the window. Outside, summer had transformed the estate grounds into lush gardens, where she and Julian often walked in the evenings. 2 months of living together had created a rhythm neither had expected to find so quickly. Mornings began with coffee shared in comfortable silence, Julian reviewing architectural plans while Nora composed. Evenings often ended with them playing piano together before retiring to their bedroom, where passion hadn't dimmed despite familiarity. "Speaking of unexpected," Lila said, holding up her phone, "have you seen this?" Nora took the device, finding herself staring at a society page photo of her and Julian at the Philharmonic Gala the previous weekend. The caption read, "Architectural heir Julian Knight and talented composer Nora Hart continue to be Manhattan's most intriguing couple." "We made the society pages again," Nora said with a grimace. "Julian will be amused." "Not just any society page," Lila pointed out. "This one's syndicated nationally." A shiver of unease passed through Nora. "Great. More people to speculate about us." "Or more people to see you succeeding," Lila countered, "including some who might not expect it." The unspoken name hung between them, Celeste, their mother, who'd abandoned them 15 years ago. Nora's nightmares had returned in the past week, old memories surfacing of the day their mother had walked out without explanation, leaving 13-year-old Nora to care for 8-year-old Lila. "She doesn't know where we are," Nora said firmly. "She might. Now." Lila's expression grew serious. "What if she tries to find us? Then she'll discover we did just fine without her." Nora set the phone down with more force than necessary. "Let's talk about something else. How's the new treatment going?" Later that night, as Julian slept peacefully beside her, Nora stared at the ceiling, haunted by possibilities she'd thought long buried. Their mother had a talent for appearing when there was something to gain. Now, with Nora's name in society pages alongside one of New York's wealthiest bachelors, the temptation might prove irresistible. "Can't sleep?" Julian murmured, his arm tightening around her waist. "Just thinking," she replied, nestling closer to his warmth. "About the commission?" His eyes remained closed, voice husky with sleep. Leonard Finch had commissioned her to compose for the Philharmonic's upcoming season, a career-defining opportunity. "No," she admitted, "about the past." He opened his eyes, then fully awake. "Want to talk about it?" Nora hesitated. She'd told Julian about her mother's abandonment, but not the ugly details. How Celeste had taken what little money remained after their father left. How she'd blamed Nora for being too difficult to love. How she'd promised to return but never had. "Not tonight," she said finally, "but thank you for asking." He kissed her forehead, accepting her boundaries as he always did. "Whenever you're ready." The next morning, Nora sat at the kitchen island, reviewing her composition while Julian prepared coffee, a domestic ritual he'd insisted on maintaining, despite the full staff at their disposal. "I have to fly to Chicago today," he reminded her, sliding a mug across the marble surface. "Sustainable housing presentation for the mayor. Back tomorrow night." "I remember," she smiled up at him. "I'm meeting with Finch this afternoon anyway. Then Lila and I have plans to try that new restaurant in Brooklyn." He leaned down to kiss her, lingering just long enough to make her body respond. "I'll miss you." It's one night, she teased, though the truth was she'd grown accustomed to his presence, the weight of his body beside hers as she slept. "Good morning, sir. You wanted me over?" "Night too many." His eyes darkened with promise. "I'll make it up to you when I return." After he left, Nora moved to the music room, losing herself in composition until the doorbell interrupted her flow. Assuming it was the package Julian had mentioned, she headed for the entrance, surprised when the housekeeper hadn't appeared to answer it. The woman on the doorstep was a stranger at first glance, perhaps 52, with hard eyes and a mouth permanently turned down at the corners. She wore expensive clothes that somehow looked wrong on her frame, as if borrowed from someone else's life. Then recognition hit like a physical blow. "Can I help you?" Nora managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman's gaze swept over Nora's casual attire with obvious disapproval. "I'm looking for Nora Hart." "I'm Nora." Something like triumph flashed across the woman's face. "Well, isn't this fitting? The great Julian Knight's latest conquest, answering the door like a common servant." Nora stiffened. "Excuse me? You don't recognize me?" It wasn't a question. "Why would you? I wasn't invited to your fancy gallery appearances or charity events." "I recognize you, Mother," Nora said coldly. "I just didn't expect to find you on my doorstep after 15 years of silence. Blood's thicker than champagne, baby girl." Celeste Hart pushed past Nora into the foyer, her eyes widening at the opulence around her. "Though you seem to have forgotten that while playing house with your rich man. 15 years. 15 years since Celeste had walked out, leaving Nora to raise Lila alone. Their father had already been gone 3 years by then, vanishing after another woman, another life. When their parents died in the plane crash 2 years later, it had merely formalized an abandonment already complete. "What are you doing here?" Nora's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Can't a mother visit her daughter?" Celeste wandered into the living room, running her fingers over expensive art pieces. "Especially when that daughter has done so well for herself. How did you find me?" "Your picture was in the society pages. Talented composer Nora Hart, companion of architectural heir Julian Knight. Quite the step up from that roach-infested apartment in Harlem." Celeste turned, her smile sharp as broken glass. "I always knew you'd be the one to pull us out." "Us?" Nora echoed, dread building in her stomach. "Family, baby girl. You, me, and Lila." Celeste sat on the white sofa, making herself comfortable. "Though I hear Lila's already enjoying the night hospitality. Smart girls, both of you." "Get out." The words emerged with surprising calm. "Now, is that any way to speak to your mother?" Celeste's eyes hardened. "After all I sacrificed for you girls?" "Sacrificed?" Rage rose in Nora's throat, hot and choking. "You abandoned us, left me to raise Lila while you chased men in dreams that never materialized." "I was giving you space to grow," Celeste replied, unruffled. "And look how well it turned out. My beautiful daughter living in a mansion, sleeping with one of the richest men in New York." Each word landed like a slap. Was that how others saw her too? A calculated climber who'd used her body to secure luxury? "What do you want?" Nora asked, though she already knew. "Just a small apartment, monthly support, nothing excessive. I'm not greedy." Celeste's smile turned conciliatory. "Think of it as back payment for all those years of single motherhood." "Single motherhood?" Nora's laugh was bitter. "You weren't there. I raised Lila on my own after you left." "Details." Celeste waved a dismissive hand. "The point is, we're family, and families share good fortune." "Not this family." Nora moved to the door, holding it open. "Leave now." Celeste didn't budge. "Don't be difficult, Nora. I've got 15 years of stories your fancy man might find interesting about the real Nora Hart. The girl who fought dirty, who'd do anything to survive. The girl whose daddy ran off because she was too much trouble." Old wounds ripped open, bleeding memories Nora had buried deep. "That's a lie, is it? You were always demanding, always needy. Men don't stay for needy women, baby girl. Your Julian will learn that too, eventually." "Get out." Nora's voice shook with fury. "I need $10,000 0 cents. Celeste finally stood. "Cash, then I'll disappear again, if that's really what you want." "I don't have that kind of money. Don't insult me." Celeste gestured around the mansion. "You're literally sleeping on it." Or under it, I suppose. Something inside Nora snapped. Fine, wait here. She retreated to the bedroom she shared with Julian, hands trembling as she opened the safe hidden in his closet. He'd given her the combination in case of emergency. Was this an emergency? Or a surrender? $10,000, 0 cents. The exact amount he'd paid her that first night to play at his charity event. The symmetry made her stomach turn. When she returned, Celeste's eyes lit with avarice at the envelope. That's my girl, always the practical one. Take it and go, Nora said coldly. Don't come back. We'll see. Celeste tucked the envelope into her purse. The night fortune is vast. 10,000 is merely a taste. After her mother left, Nora sank onto the sofa, feeling contaminated by the encounter. The beautiful home she'd begun to think of as hers now felt like a stage set, temporary, illusory. Her mother's words echoed like poison. Men don't stay for needy women. Was that what she'd become to Julian? A need, a project, a novelty that would eventually fade? She canceled her meeting with Finch, unable to focus on music when her past had crashed so violently into her present. Instead, she sat at the piano, hands hovering over keys that no longer seemed to offer solace. The call to Leela was brief but devastating. She found us, Nora said flatly, and I paid her to leave. Oh, Nora. Leela's voice held understanding rather than judgment. You should have called me. I didn't want you to see her, to hear the things she said. You're protecting me again, Leela observed, just like when we were kids. It's my job. No, Leela said firmly, it was never your job. It was hers, and she failed. But that's not on you, Nora. It never was. The words penetrated the fog of shame surrounding her. She said Dad left because of me. She's lying, Leela replied, outrage evident even through the phone. Dad left because he was weak. Mom left for the same reason. Their failures have nothing to do with you being too much or too needy or whatever garbage she's selling. If she comes back, Nora asked, what if she approaches Julian? Then he'll send her packing because he loves you, Lila's voice softened. You do know that, right? The way he looks at you, like you're the sun and moon and stars all wrapped in one. But doubt, once planted, grew like a weed in fertile soil. By the time Julian returned the following night, it had taken root deep in Nora's heart. Something's wrong, he said immediately, finding her in the darkened music room. What happened? My mother showed up. The words felt ashen in her mouth. Your mother? He crossed to her, concern etching his features. I thought she was gone. She was, for 15 years. Nora couldn't meet his eyes. She saw our picture in the papers, came looking for money. Did she threaten you? His voice hardened with protective fury. Not exactly. She just reminded me of who I really am, where I come from. Julian knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Nora, look at me. Nothing she said changes who you are. Doesn't it? She finally met his gaze. I paid her, Julian, $10,000, 0 cents from your safe to make her go away. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're ashamed. Of course I'm ashamed, she pulled her hands away. My mother shows up demanding hush money, and I paid her from my lover's safe like the kept woman she accused me of being. Is that what you think you are to me? I don't know what I am anymore. Tears burned behind her eyes. For a little while I let myself believe in this fairy tale, that someone like you could truly love someone like me, that our worlds could merge without consequences. This isn't a fairy tale, Julian said quietly. It's us, two people who found each other against impossible odds. And now reality has intruded. She stood, moving away from him. My mother will be back, Julian, with more demands, more threats, and your family already thinks I'm after your money. Now I've proven them right. To hell with what they think. He rose, frustration evident in every line of his body. I don't care about the money, Nora. Take it all if it would make you happy. That's the problem, she whispered. You don't even see how that sounds. Money means nothing to you because you've always had it. For me, it's been survival. Then let me solve this. He pulled out his phone. I'll have a team track down your mother, set up a trust she can't access directly. Stop! Nora's voice cut through his planning. You can't solve this with money. That's exactly what she wants, what she expects. to be paid off by the rich man protecting his investment. Investment! His face hardened. Is that what you think you are to me? I think, she said carefully, that we've been living in a bubble, pretending the world outside doesn't exist, pretending our differences don't matter. They don't matter, he insisted. They do when your solution to every problem is to throw money at it. The words burst from her with unexpected force. My mother shows up, you want to buy her off. Lila's sick, you pay for treatments. I can't get into Juilliard, you endow a scholarship. That's not partnership, Julian, that's patronage. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Julian stepped back, shock and hurt warring in his expression. I use what I have to protect those I love, he said quietly. I won't apologize for that. And I can't keep being the charity case you rescued from obscurity. She wrapped her arms around herself. I need to stand on my own 2 feet. You've always stood on your own feet. His control finally broke. That's what drew me to you from the beginning, your fierce independence, your refusal to bend. Do you think I don't know how extraordinary you are? How far above me in all the ways that matter? Above you? She laughed bitterly. I live in your house, play your piano, sleep in your bed, all while the world watches and waits for the novelty to wear off. Is that what you believe? His voice dropped dangerously low. That what we have is temporary, a passing infatuation? I believe, she said carefully, that we rushed into something neither of us fully understood. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and wounded pride. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder. A melancholy counterpoint to their first real fight. What are you saying, Nora? The question hung in the air. Demanding truth, she wasn't sure she was strong enough to give. But her mother's visit had awakened fears too deep to ignore. Fear of dependence, of loss, of believing in something too beautiful to last. I'm saying I need space, she finally answered. Time to remember who I am outside of this relationship. Julian stared at her, his face a mask of control that couldn't quite hide the devastation beneath. And if I asked you to stay, to fight for us instead of running at the first sign of trouble? His words struck a nerve. I'm not running. Aren't you? He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Your mother appears, says a few poisonous things, and suddenly everything we've built, everything we've felt, is in question. That looks like running to me. You don't understand. I understand fear. His voice softened. I lived with it for years before I met you. Fear of feeling too much, of losing control, of being vulnerable. You're afraid right now, Nora, not of me, but of how much you feel for me. His insight cut too close to the bone. Stop analyzing me. Then stop hiding from the truth. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Your mother's reappearance has nothing to do with us. It's a separate problem we can face together. It has everything to do with us, she countered. He reminded me of how easily things can fall apart. How people who claim to love you can walk away when you need them most. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You think I'll abandon you like your parents did. The simple truth of it made her breath catch. Everyone leaves eventually, Julian. Not me. He lifted her hand to his lips. Not now, not ever. But if you need space to believe that, I'll give it to you. Relief and loss warred within her. You will? On one condition. His eyes held hers, intense and determined. You stay in the East Wing with Lila. Keep your distance if you must, but remain close enough that when you're ready to come back, I'll be waiting. It was both generous and strategic, giving her the space she claimed to need while keeping her from running too far. The gesture, so typically Julian in its blend of respect and calculation, nearly broke her resolve. Okay, she agreed softly. That night, for the first time in months, Nora slept alone. The bed in the East Wing cold and unfamiliar. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain, wondering if she'd made the bravest decision of her life or the most cowardly. Chapter 9. The Empty Mansion. 1 week of separation stretched into 2, then 3. Nora and Julian existed like ghosts in the same enormous house, passing occasionally in hallways, exchanging polite words that masked the ache beneath. She continued her composition work in the East Wing, using a smaller piano that couldn't match the Steinway in his music room. He buried himself in the sustainable housing project, often returning home long after midnight. Lila watched them both with increasing frustration. "This is ridiculous," she told Nora one evening as they ate dinner alone in the East Wing kitchen. "You're miserable, he's miserable, just talk to him." "It's not that simple," Nora replied, pushing food around her plate without appetite. "It actually is." Lila set down her fork with uncharacteristic force. "You love him. He loves you. Everything else is just pride and fear and history. And social differences that don't disappear just because we want them to," Nora added quietly. "So what? You'll let Mom win? Let her poison the best thing that's ever happened to you?" The question lingered between them, uncomfortable in its accuracy. Celeste hadn't returned, but her venomous words had done their damage. Reopening wounds Nora thought had healed. Later that night, unable to sleep, Nora wandered through the East Wing to the connecting door that led to the main house. It remained unlocked, Julian's silent message that she was welcome to return whenever she chose. Her fingers hovered over the handle before dropping away. On the other side, unknown to her, Julian stood in the darkened hallway, his forehead pressed against the same door, pride and longing waging war within him. The following day brought news that shattered their fragile détente. Ava Knight called Nora directly, a first in their cautious friendship. "Julian has collapsed," she said without preamble. "He's at Manhattan General." The world tilted beneath Nora's feet. What happened? Exhaustion, dehydration, and a broken heart. Though the doctors aren't listing that officially, Ava's voice held no accusation, just concern. "He's been working himself to death since things changed. I'm on my way." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Nora rushed toward the private room number Ava had provided. She pushed open the door to find Julian asleep, an IV in his arm, his face pale against the white pillow. Ava sat beside him, looking up as Nora entered. "He'll be okay," she said quietly, rising to her feet. "They're keeping him overnight for observation." "I should have been there," Nora whispered, guilt crushing her chest. "Yes, you should have." Ava's bluntness was oddly comforting. "He loves you, you know. More than I've ever seen him love anyone or anything. I love him too." "Then why aren't you together?" The simple question demanded a simple answer, but Nora found herself speechless. All her carefully constructed reasons seemed hollow facing Julian's vulnerable form in the hospital bed. "I'll give you two some privacy," Ava said, gathering her purse. At the door she paused. "Whatever your mother said to you, and yes, Julian told me about her visit, ask yourself this: whose voice do you want in your head? Hers or his?" Left alone with Julian, Nora moved to his bedside, taking his hand in hers. His fingers were cold, lacking their usual strength. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, pressing his palm to her cheek. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. "Nora, I'm here." Tears spilled down her face. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by cautious hope. "What changed?" "Seeing you like this, realizing I've been letting fear make my decisions." She gripped his hand tighter. "I've been so afraid of losing myself in you that I nearly lost us both." "Your fears weren't groundless," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I do try to solve everything with money. It's the tool I know best. And I push people away before they can leave me." She smiled sadly. "We're quite a pair. A perfect pair." His free hand reached up to touch her face. Different notes creating harmony. The music metaphor, so them, broke the last of her resistance. She leaned down, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of salt and reunion. "Come home," he whispered against her mouth. "Really home. To our bed. Our life." "Yes," she replied simply. When Julian was discharged the following day, Nora drove him back to the estate herself. They entered through the main doors together, his arm around her waist, both for support and from unwillingness to break contact. "Wait," he said as they reached the grand staircase. "There's something I need to show you first." He led her to his study, a room she'd rarely entered, respecting his private workspace. On his desk lay a stack of legal documents. "What's this?" she asked as he handed her the top folder. "Open it." Inside she found papers establishing the Nora Hart Foundation for Musical Education, a nonprofit organization with significant funding. "You created this?" She looked up, confused. "For you to run?" He sat on the edge of his desk, completely independently. "Your own staff, your own decision-making authority, your name, your vision." She flipped through more pages, understanding dawning. This would provide music education in underserved communities, starting with Harlem. Julian watched her carefully. "I created the framework and funding, but the direction is yours to determine if you want it." "When did you do this?" "I started it the night you moved to the East Wing." His smile was tinged with sadness. "I couldn't fix what was broken between us, but I could give you something that was truly yours. Not a gift, but a platform for your passion." The thoughtfulness of it, the perfect understanding of what she needed, left Nora speechless. This wasn't throwing money at a problem. This was using privilege to create opportunity, not just for her, but for children like she had once been. "There's more," Julian said, handing her another folder. This one contained deed transfers in her name, the community center in Harlem where she'd first learned piano as a child, scheduled for demolition to make way for luxury condos. "You bought it?" she whispered. "To save it, for the foundation to use as its first location." He took her hands in his. "I know money can't solve everything, Nora, but sometimes it can help create spaces where real solutions begin." Understanding bloomed within her. This was how they would bridge their worlds. Not by pretending differences didn't exist, but by using their unique strengths in partnership. "Thank you," she said, emotion making her voice unsteady. "Not just for this, but for understanding what I needed, even when I pushed you away. I had time to think in that hospital bed," his fingers interlaced with hers, "about what matters, about what I want for us." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This isn't because I collapsed," he said quietly, "or because I'm afraid of losing you again. I bought this the day before your mother appeared." Nora's heart hammered against her ribs as he opened the box to reveal a ring. Not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected, but a unique design of sapphires surrounding a pearl, elegant and distinctive. "The pearl reminded me of you," he explained. "Something precious, created through adversity, beautiful because of its journey, not despite it." He slid from the desk to one knee, still holding her hands. "Nora Hart, will you marry me? Not as a knight acquisition, but as my equal, my partner, my heart's true home." Tears blurred her vision as the last walls around her heart crumbled completely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with everything I am." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, Nora finally understood. Love wasn't about erasing differences or pretending they didn't exist. It was about building bridges between separate shores, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could achieve alone. That night in their shared bed, they rediscovered each other with a passion deepened by separation. Every touch, every kiss carried new meaning. Promises of forever, vows more binding than any ceremony could provide. "I love you," Nora breathed against his skin as they moved together in perfect rhythm. "All of you, the privilege, the power, the tenderness underneath." "And I love you," Julian replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Your strength, your talent, your unflinching honesty." His hands cradled her face as he looked into her eyes. "My wife, my future." As they fell into shared bliss, then peaceful slumber in each other's arms, the mansion no longer felt empty to either of them. It had become, at last, a true home. Chapter 10. Perfect Harmony. The Harlem Community Music Center hummed with anticipation. Children in their best clothes fidgeted on folding chairs, while proud parents whispered and pointed to the renovated stage. 6 months ago, this building had been a crumbling shell, destined for demolition. Another casualty of gentrification. Now it shone with fresh paint, gleaming wood floors and, most importantly, a row of refurbished pianos along the back wall. Instruments donated from across the city, each with its own history and voice. Behind a partition that served as a makeshift bridal suite, Nora Hart stood before a vintage mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back. Her wedding gown wasn't the traditional white that Eleanor Knight had subtly pushed for, but a creation of deep midnight blue silk that flowed like water around her curves, embedded with tiny crystals that caught the light like stars. Around her neck hung her mother's only legacy worth keeping, a small silver pendant containing a fragment of sheet music from her parents' favorite jazz composition. "Stop fidgeting," Leela scolded gently, adjusting the delicate beaded headpiece nestled in Nora's curls. Her sister looked radiant in her maid-of-honor dress, her health now robust enough that the illness that had once threatened her life seemed like a distant memory. "You're gonna mess up all my hard work." "I'm nervous," Nora admitted. "About marrying Julian? Or about playing your duet in front of all those people?" "Neither." Nora smoothed her hands over the silk. "About whether I've lost my mind by inviting her." Both sisters glanced toward the door, beyond which Celeste Hart waited with the other guests. After much soul-searching, Nora had made the decision to invite their mother to the wedding, not with hopes of reconciliation, but as a final closing of that chapter. "Let her see what you've built," Julian had suggested. "Your success is the best answer to her poison." "You're not crazy," Lila said firmly. "You're brave." "There's a difference." A soft knock interrupted them, and Ava Knight entered, elegant in emerald green that complemented her warm copper complexion. Julian's sister had become an unexpected ally over the past months, her own rebellion against the Knight family expectations creating natural common ground with Nora. "It's almost time," she said, her smile genuine. "My brother is pacing so much he's going to wear through his Italian leather shoes." "Is your mother behaving?" Nora asked. Ava laughed. "As much as Eleanor Knight ever behaves. She did comment that your choice of venue was refreshingly authentic, which I think is her version of approval. The decision to marry at the community center, rather than some grand Manhattan venue, had been deliberate, a statement about their shared values and the future they planned to build together. The fact that it happened to scandalize half of New York society was merely a bonus. "And Celeste?" Lila asked. Ava's expression grew more measured. Front row, looking uncomfortable as hell. "Leonard Finch is keeping an eye on her." After the proposal, Celeste had reappeared, this time demanding an outrageous sum in exchange for her absence at the wedding. The old Nora might have paid her off again, anything to avoid confrontation, but the woman who'd found her voice, both musically and personally, chose a different path. "Ready?" Leela asked, offering her arm. Nora took a deep breath, touching the pendant at her throat. "Ready." The renovated auditorium had been transformed for the occasion. White flowers cascaded from the ceiling, their fragrance mingling with the scent of fresh wood and possibility. Instead of traditional rows, the guests sat in a semicircle around a central area, where two grand pianos faced each other, one black, one white, symbols of their different backgrounds united in purpose. And there stood Julian, breathtaking in his tuxedo, his eyes finding hers instantly. The love in his gaze was so palpable it seemed to illuminate the space between them, drawing her forward when her feet might otherwise have faltered. As she moved down the aisle, Nora was acutely aware of the worlds colliding in this room. Harlem neighbors beside Manhattan elite, music students alongside corporate executives. In the front row, Eleanor Knight sat rigid but resigned beside Celeste Hart, who couldn't quite hide her shock at the evident adoration on Julian's face as Nora approached. They met in the center of the circle, surrounded by the community they'd created together. "You're stunning," Julian whispered, taking her hands in his. "So are you," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. The officiate, not a traditional minister but the elderly piano teacher who had first placed Nora's small fingers on keys when she was 6 years old, stepped forward. "We gather today not in a church or hall, but in a place of creation and possibility," Mrs. Thompson began, her voice carrying surprising strength, fitting for a union that has created new possibilities for so many. Her gaze swept over the renovated center, now the flagship location of the Nora Hart Foundation for Musical Education, which provided instruments and lessons to children who might otherwise never touch a piano or violin. The ceremony was brief but profound, their vows simple and unadorned, no flowery promises, just truth spoken from the heart. "Nora," Julian said, his voice steady as he held her gaze, "before you, I lived in a world of muted colors and distant sounds. You taught me to hear the music in silence, to feel the rhythm of real connection. I vow to honor your independence while offering my strength, to respect your journey while walking beside you, to love you not as my possession, but as my equal in all things." Tears gathered in Nora's eyes as she responded. "Julian, you found me when I was hiding behind my music, afraid to be seen. You didn't rescue me. I vow to challenge you when you need truth, support you when you need strength, and love you through whatever symphonies or dissonance life brings our way." They exchanged rings, his a simple platinum band engraved with a musical staff, hers a delicate match to her engagement ring. Then, instead of a traditional kiss, they moved to their respective pianos. "Music brought us together," Julian explained to their guests. "It seems only fitting that music should seal our union." Nora's fingers hovered over the keys for just a moment before beginning. The piece started with a single melody line, her journey solitary and determined. The composition evolved into something more complex as Julian joined, his part interweaving with hers in perfect counterpoint. Their separate melodies created a complex tapestry of sound that spoke of struggle, discovery, separation, and ultimately, an unbreakable bond. As Nora played, she found herself meeting different gazes in the audience. Lila, watching with tears streaming down her face. Ava, whose own struggle with addiction had led to unexpected strength. Eleanor, whose rigid expression had softened almost imperceptibly. And finally Celeste, whose eyes revealed confusion, giving way to reluctant recognition of her daughter's undeniable talent. The final movement brought Nora and Julian to a shared crescendo of joy so pure it brought tears to many eyes. As the last notes hung in the air, he rose from his bench and crossed to her. Lifting her to her feet, he finally claimed her lips in a kiss that promised forever. The reception transformed the center into a celebration that genuinely bridged their two worlds. Children from the neighborhood danced alongside business executives. Eleanor Knight, initially stiff and formal, found herself drawn into conversation with Mrs. Thompson about the importance of early music education. Even Celeste Hart remained subdued, watching her daughter from a distance with an expression that might, in certain lights, have been mistaken for pride. "She won't stay," Lila said quietly, appearing at Nora's side as she watched their mother from across the room. "This isn't her world." "None of this was ever her world," Nora agreed. "But I'm glad she saw it, saw us." "Do you think she regrets leaving?" Nora considered this, watching as Celeste declined another glass of champagne, her eyes darting toward the exit. "I think she regrets what she missed, but not the leaving itself. Some people aren't built for staying." "Unlike your husband," Lila said with a smile, nodding toward Julian, who was making his way back to Nora's side after speaking with the catering staff. "Unlike my husband," Nora agreed, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. Late in the evening, as guests mingled and celebrated, Julian pulled Nora onto the small balcony overlooking the Harlem streets where she'd grown up. "Happy, Mrs. Knight?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Deliriously, Mr. Hart," she teased back, having insisted on keeping her name professionally while taking his legally. Another bridge between their worlds. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small envelope from his pocket. "A wedding gift." Curious, Nora opened it to find a deed, not to another building or property as she half expected, but to a small cottage on a lake in the Berkshires. "It's just ours," Julian explained softly. "Not a Knight family property, not a foundation asset, just a place where we can be simply Julian and Nora." The thoughtfulness of it, understanding her need for a space untouched by either of their pasts, overwhelmed her. "I love you," she whispered, those 3 words containing universes of meaning. His response was to draw her closer, his kiss soft but insistent, a promise of the night to come. Later, after they'd bid farewell to their guests and retreated to the suite Julian had arranged in a nearby boutique hotel, his concession to her wish to spend their wedding night in Harlem, they came together with the passion that had defined their relationship from the beginning. His hands traced her body with reverence, her curves now familiar territory that still evoked wonder. Her fingers mapped the strong planes of his chest, the definition of muscles that tensed beneath her touch. They moved together with the perfect synchronicity of practiced lovers who still discovered new harmonies with each encounter. "My wife," he breathed against her neck, the words sending shivers down her spine. "My husband," she answered, arching into his touch as he found the places that made her gasp. When they finally joined, it was with the sweet intensity of completion. two parts of a whole finding home in each other's arms. Pleasure built between them like the crescendo of their wedding duet, building and building until they shattered together, names on each other's lips like prayers. Afterward, as moonlight painted silver patterns across their entwined bodies, Julian traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "What are you thinking?" Nora asked, hearing his heartbeat beneath her ear. "About your mother," he admitted, "about how different things might have been if she'd stayed." Nora considered this. "I wouldn't be who I am," she said finally. "I wouldn't have raised Lila, wouldn't have fought so hard for my music, might never have been playing at that jazz club the night you walked in. So, in a strange way—" "Don't say we owe her," Nora warned, though without heat. "But yes, our paths are shaped by absence as much as presence. Her leaving forced me to become strong in ways I might not have otherwise." "Like my father's coldness shaped me," Julian observed, "making me determined to build connections, not walls." Nora lifted her head to look at him. "Are we getting philosophical on our wedding night, Mr. Knight?" "Just appreciating the complex composition that brought us here," he replied, pulling her closer. "Every discord that led to harmony." 1 year later, they stood together in the same community center, now thriving with daily music lessons and community programs. Nora's foundation had expanded to 3 locations across the city, while Julian's sustainable housing initiative had broken ground on its second development, this one incorporating a health center specifically designed for chronic conditions like Lila's lupus. But today wasn't about their professional successes. Today was about introducing their newborn daughter to the place where their union had been celebrated. Ilara, Lila Knight, just 6 weeks old, slept peacefully in Nora's arms as Julian guided them to the twin pianos, still positioned center stage. "Too soon for her first lesson," he joked, gently caressing the baby's perfect cheek. "Maybe we start with lullabies," Nora suggested with a smile, though she already seems to prefer Debussy to Mozart. "A girl of discriminating taste," Julian agreed, his eyes soft with love as he gazed at their daughter, like her mother. Celeste had not returned after the wedding, but her absence no longer carried the weight it once had. Eleanor had surprised them all by becoming a doting grandmother, her initial resistance to Nora melting away completely the first time she held Ilara. Even the Knight Architectural Board had embraced the changes Julian championed, recognizing that ethical development could be both profitable and beneficial to communities. As Nora sat at the piano, their child cradled in one arm, Julian beside her on the bench, she marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From that first night in the jazz club to this moment of perfect contentment, every challenge, every struggle had been worth it. Julian began to play softly, a gentle melody he'd composed during her pregnancy. Nora joined with her free hand, adding depth and harmony to his creation. Little Ilara stirred, her eyes opening to reveal the same rich brown as her mother's, watching with seemingly impossible focus as her parents played. This was their perfect harmony, not the absence of dissonance, but the beautiful resolution that came from facing it together. 2 different lives, 2 different worlds, merged into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have created alone. As the last notes faded into the warm afternoon light, Julian pressed a kiss to Nora's temple, then one to their daughter's forehead. "My family," he whispered, the simple words containing all the music his heart could hold. "Our masterpiece," Nora replied, leaning into his embrace as their daughter's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, completing the circle of their love. Outside, the streets of Harlem continued their eternal rhythm, lives intersecting, separating, creating new patterns with each passing moment. But within these walls, in this space they'd created together, Nora and Julian had found their true home, not in a place, but in each other.